I didn't think you wanted my head.
Okay, so you guys know all week long, we've been yeehaw and all that stuff, wearing our cowboy hats. We are the Space Cowboys. We are actually a team that's interesting. We are not, none of us are from the same district. So what we'd like to do first is just say our name and what district we teach in. And also, we were just kind of put together randomly, and I think one thing I'd like to say before we introduce ourselves is I couldn't have asked for a better team of people I didn't know before I started this process, so thank you all. Thank you all very much. But I'm Allison Miller. I teach at South Brunswick High School.
The Vikings.
Susan Franco, Trenton Public Schools.
My name is Nick, but since becoming a Space Cowboy, some people call me Maurice. I teach at the Penny School. Kind of stole my
So some people call me a Space Cowboy. Some people call me
The gangster of glory.
And this past week, some people would call me Darius Rucker. But my real name is Darryl Williams. 8th grade science, chemistry, physics at in Ewing, Fisher Middle School in Ewing, New Jersey.
And I'm Pat Hillier. I teach 7th grade science in Matawan Avenue Middle School. And I live in Howell, Central Jersey.
John DeLooper. I'm with the Princeton Applied Physics Laboratory. It was my job to try and help them get an experiment up in microgravity.
Now, before we get started on our little activity that we have prepared for you all, Daryl's just going to kind of go through and say a little bit about what we did when we were up there.
So we had several ideas, and we came up with 3. So they started off with, they seemed pretty simple. We had a pendulum, and we thought, well, how can we make the pendulum a little more high-tech? So we put a motion sensor on it. And the pendulum idea was great because for us to teach physics, having the video of the behavior of that, and then in 0G, which you cannot do with the class, was great. The second part was a bobbing mass on a spring. And again, that was also hooked up to a motion sensor. And we weren't sure what was going to happen in 0G. Kind of had some thoughts, and it did everything from floating in place to floating above the box to breaking off the spring. And then there was this very unique idea of bubbles. I think most of us, when we heard this idea of bubble guns in zero gravity, were like, what in the world is that kind of idea? But it was pretty cool because we then started analyzing it more, talking about surface tension, how bubbles, I didn't know this, I'm supposed to explain, how bubbles, when they start to pop from the top, and it starts to thin out at the top, and then it starts to actually turn looks like it's black at the top, and then it'll pop. So we wanted to see how bubbles were affected in 2G. We saw 1G and then 0G. In 2G, they went straight down. They popped fairly fast. In 0G, it was interesting because we had 2 cameras. The bubbles would float, and most of them started then to collect at the top. And they did last. Well, we had to analyze our large amount of video and data, but they would collect it at the top. So we had a nice little conglomerate of bubbles at the top of the bubble sheet. And we found out, because they were very simple experiments, we thought they were very simple. One thing I think that we realized was that it wasn't just the science part of it, but the construction of our box. We had several things that went wrong, and that was very hard to fix. So just the experience itself was incredible. To put ourselves in our students' shoes, if we're asking them to do an activity for the first time, to us we're like, you can do the activity. But to them, they might have felt, well, most likely they felt the way we felt in 0G, besides the floating part.
So instead of a PowerPoint presentation, we actually did what we think cowboys do best. We've created some campfire songs. Now we know that we can't have a fire and all sit around it in this room right here because that would make it even hotter. But what we did is